If I could have wet hair all the time, that'd be awesome. Millionaire Success Habits by Dan Graziosi. This book is not worth judging for its title as much as its content, because this book has just as generic a name as it does rich, valuable content within it that I think literally any reader can immediately start applying to their life to make it both more success-oriented and fulfilling. Very few self-help books, especially the newer ones, will really focus on that balance. A lot of people are so far on one end of the spectrum, by the end of their lives, they regret not focusing on the other. I honestly just think the name is generic because I feel like the three words millionaire, success, and habits are all each in so many different book titles through a lens of focus. This book, for example, is actually very heavily focused on actual millionaire success habits. Dan Graziosi, who by the way, he's the writer, he looks up to Tony Robbins, just like I do, is one of the most enthusiastic, passionate people I've seen advertising their book on Facebook. And I see more advertisements for books on Facebook than anything else on Facebook. And as soon as I saw it, like every other fucking book I see on Facebook, I look it up immediately and I get it on Audible. It was because of that, the blue Tesla he said it paid for, and very easily because of the way he was responding to all the negative comments. I don't care if this is because of self-education, because in my case it always is, but he comes off as extremely optimistic and not someone to forget taking their own advice. He's someone who clearly strives for greatness. You can tell through this book, and anyone who has to doubt a book like this needs a book like this more than anything else, because that's a fucking poor excuse not to spend like $20 on a book with one paragraph in it. And I'm not talking about just this book, I'm talking about a lot of fucking business and self-help books. That one paragraph that can make you $20 million if you can apply it correctly for the right amount of time. All it takes is the execution of one idea to snowball your business onto a much higher platform and scale of influence. So check this book out if you're interested. Dan Graziosi, Millionaire Success Habits. Pitch Anything by Oren Klaff, or Klaff, I don't know. This book by Oren Klaff is meant to explain a framework of sale pitching. Very unique framework. It's very powerful, creative shit. The type that I cannot say I have found in any other sales book. However, I feel like it didn't explain the pitch process, the actual process as thoroughly as it could have, in comparison to the actual framework itself. Contrary to this, I believe in the beginning he said the framework, its understanding and application is pretty much necessary for acquiring and mastering the scale of pitching in the first place. So if you're a beginner when it comes to stuff like pitching, this book is fucking like, you kind of need it. I have no other recommendations in general regarding pitching, so I don't really blame him. Maybe I wasn't paying attention. Maybe it's my fault. It also requires a bit of an understanding, according to him, of neuroscience and the like, which he, by the way, explains in a simple fucking layman's terms type of way. If you're a fucking idiot and you read this a handful of times, I can promise you that you will understand it pretty well. This is the type of shit that I hear in other books, like, okay, I never really learned how to speak Chinese and Russian in the same time in school, so I don't really know if I have the brain capacity to understand this. Oren Klaff has a very simple, playful, colorful way of looking at things, and the narration was very entertaining. I'm not easy to impress when it comes to audiobooks and narration, so if you buy this audiobook, let the stories consume you. Learn from them, learn from his experiences, and create experiences of your own. Pitch Anything by Oren Klaff. Very good book. He also has a basic guide at the end, which explains some very important precautions that he believes very firmly that everybody should know before starting to apply these tactics. Pretty much how to get the most out of implementing them without fucking yourself. Most books don't have or do anything like this, especially at the end. F.U. Money by Dan Lok. This book is a far more practical, hardcore, less spiritual version, not that there's anything wrong with that, of Jen Sincero's You Are a Badass Too, or I think like You Are a Badass at Making Money, something like that. It's a very silly title, but it's a pretty good book. This dude is so to the point. I also got his book after reading his Facebook comments on his ad. He also has sort of a sense of humor that kind of lingers through the book. Just in the ad, he described his old car as a $2,500 limit. In a comment where someone was like, everyone's giving things out for free. How do I know if this is gonna be worth my time? This guy just responded and said, it's a fucking book I'm giving away. He explains how what you want material-wise is not only really not anything to be ashamed of whatsoever, but it also requires far, far less money or work than you probably imagine. He explains why there's absolutely nothing wrong with being rich. His writing will occasionally be about his own experiences, which I certainly admire. I try to balance talking about myself and talking about others in my songs, videos, podcast episodes, and everything else. Because it's like, how badly do I want to be in the ranks of influence with the people I look up to? All of them did the same thing. He tells a lot of his story. A lot of it is about mindset too. It's very authentic, uncensored, gritty, hardcore, and quite entertaining. It's not some intellectual, philosophical, spiritual law of attraction bullshit. There's actually a part of it where he talks about the law of attraction communication and how it doesn't mean anything without action. And a lot of people who are such fanatics of the law of attraction totally fucking forget this. F You Money by Dan Lok. F You Money is supposed to be fuck you money. Like, fuck you, I do what I want. Just Listen by Mark Goulston. This is written by a psychiatrist with, I believe, like 30 years of experience in his field. He works with businessmen, salespeople, CEOs. He does family and marriage counselings. This guy does a lot of different shit. And the beginning of this book is easily explained by the rest of it. It begins with a little quote, a little story I will never forget when I feel misunderstood by somebody during a conversation. Something about how the author is approached constantly during network events by CEOs and shit. And they tell him, is there something I'm missing when trying to get through to people? It's like trying to break down a brick wall. And the author says, if getting through to people is like trying to break down a brick wall, all you need to do is find the loose brick. This book is about communication. It's about getting through to people and finding the loose brick and going from there. And like 99% of people are fucking terrible at this. Now, the only reason I'm saying that is because I understand it is direct, but it's really just an assessment of self-awareness. When someone says most people, depending on how considerate you may be of your surroundings, you may begin to ask yourself, is he talking about me? And whether or not I'm talking about you, because it's the internet, is really up to you. That's why I talk like this when I talk about people and not a specific person. I never really talk about specific people unless I'm talking to the specific person. If I were sitting down with you in a fucking quiet blue room and we were enjoying some salad together at a table, instead of saying you're fucking terrible at communication, I would actually definitely be way more likely to say, so I was wondering, how do you feel about your own communication skills? This book seriously made me question the way I persuade people to look at things. It's like it takes one objective of many that is explained throughout the book of How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie, and it dives the fuck deep into it. It's so deep that there's not a single nook or cranny that he doesn't inspect and explain very thoroughly and in a way that's easy to understand. So this book really made me question the way I persuade people to look at things the way I do. That sounds selfish, doesn't it? Well, you might be surprised how much of that process involves proving to other people that you know that the cost of doing so is looking at things the way they do first. He tells a lot of fascinating personal stories, some of which are very personal. But as one of my main mentors says, the more personal it is, the more universal it is. Amazing book. I definitely needed to listen to this one, probably more so than the other books I've listened to this month. Just Listen by Mark Goulston. Master the Art of Selling by Tom Hopkins. It seemed to me at first like this was Tom Hopkins' most popular book, but this really seems like a total guide to all means of selling things, at least in the sales business. If you want to talk about social media and shit, that's almost like a totally different ballpark in my opinion. There are so many moments in this book I heard and I was like, whoa, he's right, and how did I not know that already? Like, you know how it's easy to just get a DM and ignore it? You know how it's so easy to just ignore a phone call and delete the voicemail? You can get rid of all of these things. You could probably block a bunch of phone numbers, but the hardest thing to get rid of is a body. And then he talks about scheduling to meet after cold calling people, interrupting people, referrals, lots of very fun stuff, lots of tough stuff, lots of attention hacking, lots of sales techniques in general. I heard about Tom Hopkins through a seminar from one of my top mentors, Grant Cardone. Dude, this guy is on fire. If you think the way I think about things is unconventional, he's a great source of knowledge I get them from. Someone was like, who do you study? Then he started talking about CEOs, magnates, and he was like, obviously salespeople. I wanted to learn from the top people at the time. Brian Tracy, who I'm a fanatic of, and Tom Hopkins. I actually wanted to surpass them and invent a totally new way of doing things. This is not my official Grant Cardone impersonation, but someday I'll get to that point. I was like, if he learned from Brian Tracy and I haven't heard of Tom Hopkins, I need to buy his most famous book right fucking now. Tom very briefly tells his story. He gets right to the point and starts going deep into the sales process. He very practically eliminates all of your excuses. He explains all of the objections that people have to like doing that extra call, like with the fear of rejection, which fucks everybody up, whether in sales or not, all the time in life. He said to just imagine every time you hear the word no, a $10 bill is put into your wallet. Give yourself a mental reward every time someone rejects you or hates on you. I knew some other things about haters and rejection, but this is why I love these books. Even things that you know a bit about already, you can get different perspectives on those things, and that is fucking invaluable. There are these ideas and so many more in this book. He talks about a very practical means of goal setting, which is so important. If you don't have goals, you can be the hardest worker you want, but I swear you will not be able to reach closer at all to that full potential that you always talk about or think about unless you get good at it. And that is not just my experience speaking. He talks about there's an entire fucking section of sales closing techniques that are all very different from each other and work super well. Even small things. Someone's like, don't send me 50 beats, just send me like 10. And I'm like, let me ask you this. If I send you 50 and you only listen to 10, do you think the other 40 will be offended? Legendary fucking book. How to Master the Art of Selling Darling by Tom Hopkins. So that's my books for this month. I know I was slacking on the books this month, but I've been putting a lot of time lately into my 5th studio EP. I think I listened to 70 or 80 books last year, but I will be doing these book reviews, these titles, on the last Wednesday of every month, so I can keep myself in check and force myself to listen to as many books as possible and give very thorough analyses. So I am looking forward to continuing this big-ass journey with you guys. It's just better that way because I force myself to retain the information and be like, look man, your viewers gotta know this shit, because I want you guys to know what I'm learning about. And I don't fucking care how much of my money goes down the drain just for the sake of that happening. So what do you guys think? Did you read or listen to any of these books at some point? What did you think of them? Make sure to drop in a comment a couple of recommendations if you've read any books recently that stuck out to you. Also make sure to leave a like if you liked it, subscribe if you haven't already. If you could turn on that bell to receive a notification every time I drop a new video, that would mean the world to me. You guys can find me everywhere, and I will see you then.